My husband had a threesome with my best friend and his girl best friend, and I got so angry that I hooked up with his boss, but now I regret it. My brother had to have surgery and I wanted to be there for him, so I ended up staying about 2 weeks. I always knew that my best friend had a thing for my husband. She's admitted it multiple times, but I would just laugh it off because surely my married best friend wouldn't fuck my husband, right? I didn't even catch them. My husband's girl best friend is just that insane that she casually admitted it to me as I was cleaning the kitchen when I got back. I thought she was kidding. No, she wasn't. I asked my best friend if this was true over a phone call, and she at first denied it, but then broke down sobbing and fucking admitted to it. I was so angry I threw all my husband's shit into a big suitcase and tossed it in the front lawn. I locked the doors and piled a bunch of shit of it in front like a couch, an end table, etc. so the dumb fuck couldn't get in. Of course, when he got home from work and couldn't get in, he started panicking. He banged on the door and shouted for me to let him in. I just stayed upstairs with our dog and let him tire himself out. Eventually he left, and from what I know, he stayed the night at his girl best friend's shitty apartment. They probably fucked too, all while he was crying over me. Dumbass. After a few weeks of him blowing up my phone and pleading with me, I finally let him come home and we talked. He was sobbing and apologizing to me, said he was a sex addict and that he needed help, told him that I want him to go to therapy as well as us going to couples counseling. He agreed to it without any fight. He slept on the couch while I slept in the bedroom. My best friend hadn't even made any moves to contact me or apologize for being a homewrecker that she is. My husband ended up having some sort of work dinner party a week or so later that he needed to attend and invited me. This was the first time he's ever invited me to anything like this. Pretty sure it's because none of his female coworkers know that he's married. Or I'm assuming that's the case because of how shocked they seem to meet me. At the dinner, his boss, who's in his 50s, was chatting me up. Newly divorced, and I asked him how that was. Made sure to ask loud enough for my husband to hear me. We ended up chatting all night, and my husband ended up scurrying off from the dinner table and told me that he was going to go home and told me to get an Uber home, clearly pissed off at me. Needless to say, his boss was shocked at how he treated me, and I couldn't help but to play the sad, lonely wife bit. It ultimately ended up in us going back to his house and hooking up. When I woke up that morning, I did end up Ubering home. Since then, his boss has sent flowers to our home, called me a few times, and my husband is completely aware of this, and now the regret is starting to sink in. The revenge felt nice, but now it's clear that it's eating at both of us. I'm going to find a lawyer and start the process soon. Also, I forgot to add that when we had our first therapy appointment, he never showed. He was going to head there after visiting his sister who lives just a few miles from us. I sat and waited in that office for over an hour before I just went home and saw his ass sitting on the couch texting on his phone. He knew that we had an appointment that day because I texted him multiple times about it. He had no intention whatsoever to fix this, give me closure, or start fixing his sex addiction. It's been a wild few weeks. We started the divorce process. Soon-to-be ex moved out, reluctantly may I add. He moved in with his girl best friend, now fiance actually, and they're expecting. It's his, I think. Girl best friend's parents found out what she did, and let's just say it's not going well. I told my best friend's husband everything. He didn't believe me at first, but after I started showing him all the texts, photos, etc., he just broke down. He kicked her out and she showed up with her shit, thinking I'd let her move in. Long story short, I had to call the cops and get her off of my property. I haven't kept in contact with the boss, honestly. He just bought me a few gifts, but I politely told him no. He was pretty nice about being rejected and told me it was worth a shot. My family found out shortly after I made the post. I found out many things since the process began. My husband was the cigarette of the office, being passed around by all of his female coworkers. Do you know how many apologies I've received? I'll be set for a lifetime on apologies. But I mean, seriously, why does an office have that much sex? Once the divorce is finalized, I'm selling the house and moving into something smaller. I hate big houses. I always like small spaces. I found a cute apartment that's a 1-bed, 1-bath. It'd be perfect for me and my dog. I know the divorce is gonna become nasty, especially with his girl best friend being his fiance now. We've already had to get a forensic accountant involved since he accused me of stealing his money and wiring most of it into my bank account. That was weird. Other than that, I'm doing good. I'm actually relieved and gonna start doing things that I love doing. I'm gonna get back into my book club. I'm gonna start exercising how I used to. I still exercise, but stopped doing it so much because he hated girls with abs. I'm gonna be me again. I hope he becomes him again and finds happiness. Truly. Also, to all the bros defending him, calling me a terrible wife, sending me death threats, vulgar messages, etc., I hope you all choke on soon-to-be ex's D while you're so far up his ass.
My husband wanted to open up our marriage, and now I'm dating his boss. So now he wants to close it. Let me start this by saying I didn't mean to start dating his boss. It all happened accidentally. My husband and I have been married for almost 8 years now, and we have always had a healthy marriage and great intimacy life, or so I thought. It came completely out of the blue when my husband sat me down a few months ago and said that he was feeling unsatisfied with our physical connection and he needed something more to be able to be fulfilled. I was so confused. We are intimate a couple of times a week, and he never gave any indication he was feeling unhappy in the bedroom. I was feeling hurt before he even dropped the bomb on me that he wanted to open up our marriage. I felt so small and unwanted, and he rambled on wanting to experience more freedom, but he assured me that he loved me and he wanted to stay together. I asked him why I wasn't enough for him and if there was anything I could do to make him happier in the bedroom or in our marriage in general. But all he said was that it had more to do with his masculinity than me. It didn't make me feel better, but I love him and we had already been together for so long. So reluctantly I agreed and we decided to be open from that day on. Our only terms was that we had to disclose to one another when we would start seeing people. The first couple of weeks were excruciating. He immediately started seeing a woman from his office, and I would just stay at home and cry myself to sleep while I pictured him out with the younger, more attractive woman. I was devastated for a while and honestly had zero interest in dating anyone other than my husband. But after 5 months of him dating one girlfriend and spending most nights with her instead of at home with me, I decided that I deserved to experience some freedom as well. I made a Tinder account one night while he was out with his girlfriend, and I was surprised when I got over 100 matches on the very first night. No one was really catching my attention until I matched with this one very handsome older man. He seemed very successful and he was a gorgeous silver fox. I ended up messaging him and we went out a couple of days later. I remembered the feeling of waiting for him at the bar, and it felt nice to have romantic butterflies for the first time in almost a decade. The date went amazingly and we went to see each other and eventually slept together. It was one of the most thrilling, exotic nights of my life. I hate to say it, but he was a much more talented lover than my husband, and I guess because he was older, he had more experience. Anyways, I told my husband about my boyfriend, and he honestly seemed like he didn't believe me. He literally patted me on the head and said, "Aw, good for you, honey," before heading out the door to spend the night with his girlfriend. Things got messy in a way I could never have anticipated. I knew the situation was sort of rocky, but now I truly feel like I'm living inside a soap opera. Yesterday, my boyfriend texted me asking if he left a manila folder in my car the last time we saw each other. I found the folder and he asked if I could drop it off at his job. I was off that day and figured they were important work documents, so I gathered the folder and a little snack and he sent me his location so I could come drop it off. You can imagine how stunned I was when I followed the address and it took me to my husband's place of work. I had no idea that he and my husband worked together, and all I knew was that he was the head of whatever company he worked for and he held the highest position in his office. He never spoke much about his work and we just liked to relax when we hung out together. Well, I walked into the office feeling awkward about possibly seeing my husband. I walked to my boyfriend's office and he came out to take the folder from me. He thanked me and gave me a little kiss before going back. When I turned around, of course, my husband happened to be walking by at that exact moment. He had obviously seen his boss kiss me and realized he had been my boyfriend all along. His mouth made the perfect O shape and there was hurt creeping into his eyes. I felt sort of embarrassed at that moment, even though I had done nothing wrong, so I just said hi to my husband and quickly left the office. When my husband finally got home, he broke down in tears and said how I could do this to him. I reminded him that the entire situation was his idea in the first place, and that's when my husband said that he was willing to close the marriage if it meant I would stop seeing his boss. The thing is, I have real feelings for my boyfriend, and I feel like my husband is being controlling and unfair. I find myself doubting my entire marriage, and I think I might end up having to choose between the two of them.
There is an update, and oh my gosh. The last time I posted, my husband had just found out about his boss and me dating after my husband saw his boss kiss me at his place of work. He put the pieces together and it made him upset enough to ask me to close the marriage back up. I was so torn. I felt bad to see my husband hurting, but he had left me in a place of hurt for so long after asking for this arrangement in the first place. I admit I was tempted by the things my husband said in the conversation where he asked to close our relationship. Again, he just kept saying over and over that he would be better and committed. He kept saying I was the only thing he needed in the world, and he had been blind to that before. These are all words I've been waiting and wishing to hear for so long, yet hearing them now, I felt nothing but pity for my husband. I still loved him. We've been together for almost 10 years, and what I felt for him was incredibly strong after being life partners for this long, but I still love myself more. And as I said in my initial post, I have strong feelings for my boyfriend already. I told my boyfriend that I loved him, but I had to stay in this relationship too, and I didn't want to close our marriage back up. He was a mess at this answer. At one point, he got on his knees to beg me to reconsider, but I stood firm. I wouldn't hurt myself again to prioritize my husband's feelings. For the next couple of months, my husband went through a disorienting array of behaviors towards me. For the first few months, he was incredibly loving and attentive to me. He was cooking for us every night and insisted we had dinner almost every night together at home. He bought me flowers every day for 2 months and tried to initiate to sleep with me literally every night. These are things he's never really done to me before, so I was surprised and happy with all of these changes. Although it did seem sort of performative of him to only start being a good husband now in an effort to get me back for himself. If he really did love me, where had this treatment been before? He still seemed sad on the nights when I left him to go see my boyfriend, and I noticed him seeing his own girlfriend less. Anyways, I was feeling conflicted, but my boyfriend and I's relationship continued to blossom as we learned more about each other and kept spending time together. About a month ago, my boyfriend had taken me on a very luxurious, intimate date. He reserved an entire restaurant for us and arranged a helicopter ride for us after dinner. It was such a beautiful and romantic night.
We had an amazing time together. There was no special occasion, and when I asked him why he did all of this, he said he just wanted to show me how much he appreciated his time with me and I deserved to be treated like a catch that I am. Before I left my boyfriend's house the next morning, I broke down crying while venting to him, saying that I wish my situation could be less complicated and that I was sorry if he felt like our relationship was unconventional because I was still a married woman. My boyfriend just listened and held me as I cried. He held me and stroked my hair and said he didn't care about my husband. He was just grateful for any time he got to spend with me and that I was a blessing in his life, and he was just happy. He was able to meet a wonderful woman like me. He got up to make me my favorite flavor of tea. He found out my favorite brand of tea a month ago and kept the stock at his apartment since then. When he handed me the tea, he looked into my eyes and asked if it could be his turn to be honest with me. That's when he told me that he had never met anyone like me and he had fallen in love with me. As soon as he said that, something just felt so right in my body and mind. I said it back to him and we cried happy tears together. We didn't worry about anything else at that moment. We just enjoyed the vulnerability. Nothing could ruin that moment for us. Or so I thought. But I still don't regret telling him the truth about my feelings. I do love him, but I wish it hadn't resulted in the mess that it did after my boyfriend returned to work after the date. I guess he started telling some of his coworkers about how well his relationship has been going. And it must have gone back to my husband. My husband didn't react well, and I almost dropped my phone when he called me the other day from the police station. That's when I found out that my husband had attacked my boyfriend in their place of work. Apparently, he had overheard some people talking about how his boss had been bragging about his partner, and it had sent him over the edge. He sounded like a jealous child over the phone. He had entered his boss's office in a jealous fit of rage and tried to punch him straight in the face. When my boyfriend deflected, my husband picked up a coffee mug and smashed it across his head. The cops had arrested him in front of his entire office, and I assumed my boyfriend had gone to the hospital for a head wound. My husband spoke on the phone with so much hate and bitterness. It was during that call that I realized the sane, good man I had once married was long gone. And the last bit of love I had for him wilted inside of my chest as he spoke about himself, as if he was a victim of an unhinged criminal who attacked another man for his own ignorant reasons. He said that he just couldn't stand his boss keeping us apart, and he had just gotten so angry after hearing that he was talking about me as if I was his own wife. I said nothing on the phone. I just thought of the choices I faced. I could go bail my husband out of the police station, or I could go visit my boyfriend in the hospital. It didn't take long after my husband called me from the police station to make my decision. I hung up the phone, sat down, and stared at myself in the mirror for a while, thinking about what I should do. I looked into the mirror, trying to see myself as my husband did. Then trying to see myself as my boyfriend did. I realized my husband loved me for the things I could do for him, for the ways which I had served him during our marriage. He never loved me for my personality or my accomplishments. On the other hand, after we told each other we loved each other for the very first time, my boyfriend listed the specific things he loved about my personality. My boyfriend would hold my face in his hands every time I saw him, and thanked me for my time and for my existence. I started to cry when I realized my boyfriend had been giving me the love I had been searching for my entire life. He made me feel more wanted than my husband had ever made me feel in almost 10 years of marriage. I cried harder when I realized I was watching the death of my old life. My husband had been slipping through my fingers for so long, but I hadn't been ready to let him go until this very moment. This was an intense moment of clarity for me, and even though I knew the decision was life-changing, I decided to go visit my boyfriend in the hospital instead of bailing out my husband. When I got to the hospital and saw my boyfriend with a large band-aid across his head, I cried and apologized to him for his injury being my fault. He reassured me that this was my husband's fault and that there was no way either of us could have predicted he would fly off the handle like that. I immediately told him I was leaving my husband and that I could never stay with someone so violent who had hurt him like this. At this point, my boyfriend and I had been dating for about 9 months. But when I thought about leaving my husband, I thought more about my own life than my boyfriend and I's relationship. Even if I didn't feel this strongly about my boyfriend, I would have always left my husband for attacking another man and making a scene like this at his job. If I have learned anything from this past year, it was that I only needed myself and that I deserved to feel valued and cherished in any relationship. I went home with my boyfriend that night and cared for his injury. The next day, I got right into looking for divorce lawyers. I knew my husband's family would be bailing him out soon, so I returned home to our house and packed all of my essentials before reserving a hotel room for the next week. I ended up barely staying in the hotel room since my boyfriend insisted that I would be more comfortable at his place. I wanted to be there for him as he healed, and things just felt right with my boyfriend, so I ended up staying at his place after leaving my husband. And I never left. The last time I spoke with my husband directly was the day he called me from the police station. He tried to contact me after getting bailed out, even blowing up my phone after he got home and found half of my stuff gone. But I didn't care. His mistakes meant nothing to me now. And a month after he was arrested, he was served with divorce papers. I could not believe my ears after my ex-husband had returned to his old job to confront my boyfriend in the parking lot on the day he was served with divorce papers. Luckily, my boyfriend was able to defend himself against my unathletic ex and he was arrested again. Apparently, the police had found a knife on him and he had been screaming at my boyfriend for ruining his life. I was so scared for my boyfriend when I heard about this. He could easily have been seriously injured. Yet, I wasn't shocked that my boyfriend had been able to defend himself against my husband. Though he is older than my husband, he is much more fit and agile. At this point, the court granted us both restraining orders against him, and all of this evidence made our divorce speedy. The next thing I knew, my ex-husband was serving jail time while I was selling our house and splitting the profit between us. After a couple of months, things slowed down and I found myself a peaceful life with my boyfriend. He welcomed me into his spacious penthouse apartment with open arms. He told me he didn't expect me to give him all of his time after my marriage had just ended, but he loved having me around and told me I never had to leave. Every day when he came home from work, he gave me a deep kiss and a tight hug and told me how much he loved coming home to me. It's been about a year since my divorce was finalized, and I've started thinking seriously about my future with my boyfriend. He has spent every day that he's known me and treated me like a goddess, and I'm so grateful that we found each other despite everything. He has told me that he would like to make me his wife one day, but only when I'm ready. He always prioritizes my feelings, and I can't believe I accepted anything less than this love for so long in my life.
Am I wrong for telling my parents and my husband that I don't want to name my daughter after the sister I never knew? My parents had a daughter before me, Summer. She was born with cancer and died when she was only 5 weeks old. I was born 2 years later, and her memory was very strong throughout my life. My parents weren't great parents to me because they were still in very heavy grief, and it made our relationship complicated. I remember they cried on her birthday every year, and they also cried on most of mine, and she was mentioned at every celebration. I remember for a while really wanting to hear more about her, but at some point all the mentions of her were too much. It felt suffocating and I felt less important. When they'd meet new people, Summer was the child they mentioned first, and the one they talked most about. Someone would ask what grade I was in or how old I was, and they'd say Summer would be in 4th grade or Summer would have been 13 today. When I graduated high school, I asked that my parents not to mention Summer during the celebration. And they were so angry at me for wanting Summer forgotten. I took some time from them in college, but was racked with guilt, and we ended up back in touch. I got married to my husband, Kale, last year, and now we're expecting a baby girl. My parents brought up how amazing it would be for us to name our daughter Summer, and my husband was 100% on board. He was pretty much agreeing before I had a chance to react. When I did talk to him, he was shocked I had any doubts and was ready to go full steam ahead. I told him I wanted our daughter to have her own name, and I didn't want her to carry the weight of the Summer who never got the chance to grow up. And so was all her grandparents really wanted to talk about. He said he understood, but to think how loved our daughter would feel. And he knows I think Summer is a beautiful name, because I do, but the history. I told my parents I wanted my daughter to have her own name, and they cried. They didn't really comment. They then asked if I was ever going to change my mind, and I said no. But then my parents and husband were talking and wanted to try and change my mind. They brought a list of pros to me on why our daughter should be Summer, and I told them I disagreed with the list. They argued back and told me Summer deserves to be honored. I said my daughter deserves to live her life as well. My husband said we would still be able to, and the name isn't that uncommon, and that my sister would be the only person to think of. My parents told me to think of what my sister would want and how I love my sister and miss her every day. For some reason, that broke me. I did not want to name my daughter after a sister I never knew. I'm not totally sure what happened directly after I was so upset, but my husband and parents think I was cruel to say it like that. So, am I the asshole?
Am I the astronaut for refusing to ask my parents to take down a memorial to my late daughter? A 28 female gave birth to twins 2 years ago. My babies were seemingly born healthy, but before we could be discharged, my daughter Indy suffered a seizure and never got to come home. For 8 months, she'd go from getting better to worse again, until the day came where she would never get better again. She slipped away peacefully in my arms, and it's something I will never forget. Our whole family was devastated by the loss of Indy. My in-laws are crafty people and made a beautiful memorial frame for Indy. They kept one themselves and gave them to my husband and I and my parents. My parents display theirs in their living room so everyone can see when they visit them. They also have candles directly underneath it. They light the candles for my twins' birthday and Indy's anniversary. My sister gave birth to her first child back in May, and she named her daughter Indy. I'll confess that I've been unable to look at it as some beautiful tribute because it's difficult to hear the name used for another little girl and their family other than my Indy, but I've kept that to myself. Now, a few months in, my sister is bothered by the fact our parents kept Indy's memorial up when her Indy will see it whenever she's there. She said it's very morbid and seems gross to do to her daughter, who will grow up feeling very weird with her name on a memorial at her grandparents like that. My parents told her she should have thought of that before she named her daughter Indy. Thank you, parents. My sister was like, she doesn't own that name and I should be allowed to use the name I love. When our parents didn't give in to her demands, she came to me. She told me it bothers her and she knows it will bother her daughter in years to come. She wanted me to tell our parents to take down the memorial. I refused to entertain her idea. She pushed and I told her I did not want my daughter's memory tucked away forever. My sister yelled and told me that my Indy is gone and there's a living, breathing Indy who deserves to feel comfortable at her grandparents' house. I told my sister to get the F out of my face. My sister said I was a total a-hole for putting the memory of Indy before her Indy. She also said it will only confuse my son in the future when his twin's tribute becomes messed up in his only maternal cousin. She said I might not like that she used the name Indy, but she's not changing her daughter's name for me, and I should have the decency to care about her child. How long is this in? She said a few months in? Was that right? Now a few months in. Some things in life you can control.
Am I the asshole for asking my wife to think about the long-term implications of her birth plan? No. Away because my friends know my main. I know dudes get ripped in here for posting their opinions about birth, but I think this is an important opportunity for my wife, and I'm posting it because I believe the situation is nuanced and she's not hearing me out. I, 34 male, wife, Beth, 28 female, is 33 weeks pregnant. We're both very ready for this baby to come. My mom is super hands-on with my entire family. My two brothers' wives are very close with her, but Beth has just never really clicked the way the other two did. It's lying if I said it didn't bother me that my wife seemed disinterested in getting closer to my mom and sister-in-laws. For all 5 of the births of my sister-in-laws and my mother's 3 births, they were all unmedicated. It's clearly a point of pride for all of them to have done it naturally. Mom said that she chose to do it because she didn't want me and my brothers born doped up and wanted to experience the full spectrum of becoming a mother. Beth, on the other hand, is very fearful of birth and has talked to our doctor about being medicated. I don't love the idea of the mother of my child being loopy and out of it at such a critical moment, but those concerns fell on deaf ears when I raised them. I felt very excluded during the discussion around pain management, and neither Beth nor our doctor were receptive to my ideas. Mom was asking me about our birth plan the other day, and I don't know why I did this, but I just sort of panicked and told her that Beth was going for the all-natural way, like she and my sister-in-laws have. To say my mom freaked out with happiness is an understatement. She was thrilled that Beth was open to experiencing the full range of motherhood, and this might sound crazy, but I think if Beth shared this rite of passage with my mom and sister-in-law, they might finally gel. I told Beth about my slip-up to see if she'd be open to changing her mind, giving how this could serve as a bonding experience for them to share, and she lost her mind. She yelled about how she wasn't going to compete with my mom and sister-in-laws during her birth. She emphasized that it was her birth again and again, which I don't think is fair because it will be an experience we both go through, just differently. I was just trying to get her to see that there was an opportunity for her to create some sisterhood with the women of my family. I wasn't dictating or even pressuring her. I just thought that she would want to know how happy it made my mom. She told me that she didn't give a fuck about sisterhood, which was very intense because Beth does not swear. I wasn't trying to upset her. I just think she would be wise to see the future potential long-term implications of not having this experience with my mom and sister-in-laws. But Beth has been furious to the point of not speaking to me for several days, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm in the wrong, even if I was trying to help. So am I the asshole? Yeah.
How should I, 34-year-old male, tell my Muslim coworker, 29-year-old female, that I was behind her divorce? Also, gotta say, I've read this story. Her being Muslim has nothing to do with it. Don't know why he mentions it so much. I work in New York City for a financial firm. My colleague is a Muslim woman who works in the same department. It all started about a year ago. She joined our firm as a financial analyst. She is Asian. Unnecessary.
Okay.
Also, it was her first time working in New York City. I initially had no feelings for her. For the most part, she and I would talk regarding work, make small talk, and go on about our day. 2 months after she joined, our team came to know of her birthday, and we all celebrated it in a cafe. And in parentheses, they wrote, "If you know, you know," and we truly don't know. It was her birthday when I realized that I was falling for her. She is genuinely the most calm, innocent person I've ever come across. Okay, so now the Asian thing seems to be almost like he's fetishizing the whole Muslim American, Asian American thing.
Weird.
Her birthday speech made me realize that people have so many struggles and yet overcome those to be able to make a name for themselves. Anyway, the next day, she brought us all some Asian food that she cooked as gratitude. It was food for like 10 to 15 people, and I couldn't fathom she cooked for that many people. I asked her how she managed to cook for such a large group, which is when she said her husband helped her. Never in my life was I as heartbroken as I was that day.
Jesus.
I don't know why I couldn't control my anger and tears. Oh, brother. I just abruptly left the conversation and went back to my desk. I then started digging into her personal life.
What?
Got to know about her husband, who also works in another financial firm. I had a friend working in the same company as her husband. Day by day, I went miserable. I didn't know what to do. So I made up a story about her having an affair with me so her husband would leave her. I asked my friend to say this. My friend had no idea if I was lying or telling the truth. My friend told her husband about our affair, and obviously he flipped out. The next day, she came to work calmly. She walked up to my desk and I was shitting bricks. She said somebody is bad-mouthing the both of us, and then asked me to be careful, and then apologized to me for my name being dragged down with her name. I literally felt like a shit person. She didn't even for a second think that I could be behind all of this. I controlled my feelings for her. I kept seeing her every single day, but I felt like shit for doing what I did to her. After about 8 months, she invited us all for a dinner at a restaurant. She was moving to Big 4. One of my coworkers asked why her husband wasn't present. She said that they have been separated for about 6 months. There was so much sadness in her answer, but she just handled it and enjoyed the rest of dinner with us. Later, her best friend at work told me upon asking 1,000 times that her husband left her after knowing about some affair she had. I feel like shit.
Good.
You all can abuse me, but I want to genuinely help and make things right. I don't know where to start or what to do, but I love her. I know this for sure. A part of me wants her divorce to happen so I can propose her and marry her. But also, I have never felt this miserable about myself. I don't know what I was hoping to achieve by doing all of this, but I feel miserable. Should I just tell her the truth?
I found out my new roommate was a porn star, and he caught me watching one of his films. You know that guy that you've been friends with like your whole life and you have a crush on them, but they're just like either completely oblivious or they just pretend that they don't know? That was my best friend, and he moved from New York to Los Angeles, and my family is like super stuck up and uptight, and he knew that I was trying to like branch away and try something different. So he told me to find my bliss and come live with him, and he offered me a place to stay in Los Angeles. Then I move all my stuff there, and let me remind you that I'm under the impression that he's going to be there and that I'm going to be able to borrow his car because I do not have a car. I'm from New York, and I'm not used to driving, and I hate driving. He springs it on me last minute that he is going away, he's not going to be there, and he actually rented out his master room to this guy that he found on Craigslist. So in my head, I'm thinking, cool, so not only will you probably never like me back, but you also have set me up to potentially be murdered by a stranger. Finally get there, start moving my stuff in, and I meet the new guy that's going to be my roommate. He is very cute, and that's all good and all because he looks like a pretty normal person, but also like attractive people make me nervous, and I get a little flustered, and I'm like, oh, now I have to live with this guy. He ends up being a really cool guy. He breaks the ice. I'm getting to know him a little bit better, but I sit down and I'm like, well, maybe we should just have some rules. And he kind of makes fun of me for having rules, but I'm a type A personality and I need to know the ground rules. I think at this point he can kind of realize that I'm a little shy, maybe even a little prude. I'm like, let's enforce like a 3-knock rule for the bathroom because the door in the bathroom didn't lock, and he just kind of laughs at me, but he was very willing to like comply with everything. Like I said, just a really nice guy. Of course, when I call my best friend back home, she's like, okay, what's up with this new roommate? Like, what does he look like? And I ended up sending her a picture of him because we've been sending each other like selfies back and forth, just like texting, you know, being friends. And she stops me and she's like, oh my gosh, do you know who that is? And I'm like, no, who? She's like, this is blank blank. He's a pretty big, like, you know, adult film entertainer. And I'm like, well, I don't really watch any of that, so how was I supposed to know that? She's like, oh my gosh, you don't know how lucky you are. Like, he's so popular. You should look him up, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, that's a total invasion of privacy. I'm not going to do that. Okay, but curiosity did get the better of me, and one night I knew he was going to be at work and he wasn't going to get home till later, and I decided while I was sitting on the couch just a little Google search. And I found this article that popped up that was like talking about his, you know, industry and that he was making waves in a good way, and there was a link. And I clicked the link because I was curious. And then I started watching and I was like, okay, I get it. I get the appeal because he came off just so sexy, and I get why a lot of women enjoyed his work. And then I hear a bag drop by the front door, and I turn to see that my roommate is in fact home, and he has caught me watching his corn.